We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British people, carry on the struggle until in God's good time, the new world with all its powers steps forth to the rescue and the liberation.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character. I ask Congress to declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Greetings, one and all, and welcome to Seven Kinds of Mischief. I'm your host, Stone Loki. Good evening, Castle. Good evening, Dave Bob. Project Story Time. Lady Miss, the Guardian of the Void. Purple Valkyrie, thank you so very much. Purple Valkyrie. Mark the Infinitely Tired. Colin P. Smith. Yes, sir, that man could give a speech, brother. Thank you. Welcome, Dave Bob, Captain Trek. Good evening, everyone. Mary's Game Room, Heiress of Chaos. Guys, Project Storytime, thank you all so much. Darth Haster, thank you all for being here, for hanging out with us tonight. It was an honor to make that earlier today. It was an absolute honor to make that earlier today. And big welcome to the Master of Disaster, the Doctor of Destruction, Adega Outlaw.
That still kills me when you say that. Master of Disaster. Sounds like you know my history.
Nah.
I used to blow things up. All right.
I think we all did at some point. We all like to blow stuff up.
Oh, well, I got into some serious stuff. Well, you guys saw the intro. Hi, guys. How's it all going? I see the hellos for us. You can hear Loki's very tired, and I've kind of had a rough week myself, but this is probably one that we may have to revisit more often than not, simply because we were closer to this war, and for most of you, your grandparents or great-parents were involved in the war. And I was fortunate enough to, have parents that my father showed. Some of you saw on Twitter, we hashed it again with Loki. My dad and my mom, when they got married just after the war, he was wearing his sailor suit. But unlike the other stories that we have told in the past about how valor is gained, how the men and women of the past were for their rights, for decency and for humanity, this one's a big one because we have so much information when it comes to this war. We have movies, we have videos, we have, like in the intro, we have the speeches gave by the men who ran the countries of the Allies. We even have some of the Axis. Of course, we don't understand German or Japanese, most of us anyway. I'll tell you how this war really started to come to me, other than my dad. The first thing, and I was starting to tell Loki about this, it was really interesting. When I was in grade school, we were told to go pick a book out of the library, and I grabbed one simply because it had a tiger, a Chinese illustrated tiger on the cover, and I thought, well, this will be kind of cool. Flying tigers, it has to be some Chinese myth. And little did I know it was a history book. And for those of you who don't know, there was a group of volunteers from the United States before the war started for us, when Britain was engaged and most of Europe was engaged, and Japan was dominating Korea, invading China. There was a group of volunteers who couldn't sit by and watch the atrocities that were being committed, and they were able to get into China. 30 men in their planes, volunteers from the Marines, the Navy, and the Army. We didn't have an Air Force at the time.
They had to give up their commissions. They had to give up their commissions.
They made $250 a month. And they flew a very old plane. It was the P-40B Warhawks. These were not really built for the modern war of the time. They were outclassed completely by the Japanese Zero. But they went to China anyway and figured they were going to defend these people from the invading Imperial Army, because the atrocities that the Japanese were doing to the men and the women and the children were some things that we never even heard of before. Well, these men quickly found out that the Japanese Zero was amazing. It was a fantastic plane that outclassed them in every way, shape, or form, and they downed several planes. But there was something with these veterans, these volunteers. They had ingenuity, and they had a determination to be able to be of substantial worth in the effort to prevent these villainous nations. And I found out reading this book, and I still remember it to this day, these group of there is 58 now, because I think 2 of them died pretty quickly, if I remember right. They took these old Warhawks, because that's all they had, and it had one advantage: it could climb higher than the Japanese Zeros. They couldn't keep up with them. And so what they started to do was patrol at altitudes that the Zeros couldn't fly at. And then they would nosedive their ships, unloading their cannons on these Zeros. And before the Zeros even knew they were coming, these old planes that couldn't turn, couldn't accelerate, were tearing them up. And that was our first actual fighting in World War II. We had done other things, because, well, most of you probably know that the Germans, during World War, they lost, and they were on some really, really serious, heavy when it came to creating things for war, when it came to building ships, making planes. Of course, they didn't care. But one of the things that wasn't part of the embargo per se, or wasn't so tough, was easily to get around, was making submarines. And I see what we have.
We have a $1.99 tip from Anonymous. Thank you so very much, Anonymous. And we're going to go big or go home with the Godzilla score. Anonymous says, "Hey Loki, hope you're free on the 23rd. I'm planning on hijacking my husband's channel for a bit." Yes, he knows. And that is from Stephanie Littlepage. Thank you so very much, Stephanie, I sent you a DM. I will do my very, very best to be there.
Sorry about the noise in the background.
No, you're good. You're good.
Yeah. Well, it's just thumping in case anybody knows. Yeah, it's on my side, and we're having a little fun activity at the house right now, so you have to forgive that. Anyway, that was my foray into learning about the things of World War II.
No, I heard stories. My grandfather was an Army Ranger, and he parachuted in on D-Day, and he told me a story about how they came once they were able to regroup because they got scattered almost everywhere. How they came upon a line of British soldiers fighting it out with a group of German soldiers, and his CO told the British soldiers, all right, we're going to go around behind them. They don't know we're here, so we're going to go around behind them. And when they turn and start firing at us, you charge. That way you don't get hit by machine gun fire. And the British officer said, but that's not cricket. And he said, screw cricket. We're going to go around behind them and we're going to flank them. You guys be ready. And they just took off, and they took them out together. It was the first thing I'd ever heard. And I was a really little kid when he was telling me this. I think I was maybe 5 or 6. And he left me some really cool things. He left me some stuff that he brought back, and I still have some of that stuff. One of them was it's weird. He said he had gotten it off of a German soldier, but it was a dagger. It had a really weird hilt on it, and it had finger lays, so you could grip it. So I remember taking this in to have it looked at because I wanted to know. I'd never seen anything like it. The Germans carry anything like it, and the guy who took a look at it said that it wasn't a German knife, that it was made by some Jewish resistance fighter, that because at the hilt there were notches in the metal, in the blade at the very end of the very bottom of the blade, and what it used to be was a file, and they had taken this file and turned it into a knife blade. And it really blew me away. I'd never thought about that before. And Eastland Burkholder Brits wanting to play fair. Weird. Apparently that was a thing. Eastland Burkholder, well, until we invented the idea of special forces, SAS, Chandits, and commandos.
Well, it's a little different from the United States. We developed special forces quickly after the Marines back at Tripoli. Shortly after the revolution, there was a lot of Arabs that were hijacking ships and making slaves out of American citizens. And we had enough, and they developed the Marines to go and take them out. At that point, they started developing certain types of special groups, but the authentic ones that we think of, the Green Berets and the Navy SEALs, those type of groups came much later. There's always been that elite force, or the top-notch groups, the Big Red One.
And Shadowcat says, I never play fair. Bring a vibro knife to a fight. Nope, I'll use a blaster. It's funny that I grew up with this idea that you don't call a spade to spade. If you bring a spade, I will bring earth moving equipment. Funny that I grew up thinking like that. I don't know where I could have gotten that. You know, you've told me stories about you and your brothers and Adega, and I see that same thing. You don't bring a spade to spade.
No, no, you play dirty. We're coming with overforce every time.
Yeah.
Just stop it real quick. Yeah, my Loki about my brothers and I, we were kind of notorious. We were sort of for the most part. I had one brother who wasn't quite basically the guy. And he passed away. He was kind of thin, and someone hit him in the head with a bat. That was it. When we found out news, there was all five of us went out, and that never happened again.
I can imagine.
And I got to turn the camera off. Loki was talking about something. I showed him this a while back. I have here. You probably can't see a lot of the writing on it. This is a World War II relic. Doesn't look like much, but you see the little notches there. This in a paratrooper's strap, and it was for specific reason. If they got to the tree, this thing would fold. Then you got a knife to cut the silk away. What I can't show you on there, because my camera isn't that good, is that this is SS officer paratrooper knife. Not that I collect Nazi memorabilia, I don't. This was just blacksmithing. It was a very cool design. But the craftsmanship is amazing. Another thing too, this is a replica, but it's the same type of thing. It's probably very similar to, kind of similar to the knife that Loki had. This is one of the Allies' knives. It has a skull cruncher, and then this to be able to trade through the can and all the other things. It's pretty nasty beat. Like I said, it's a replica, and the original ones are incredible. If you could find one, amazing. But the biggest thing isn't so much the weapons, the plan. The biggest thing is why we fight. That's why we keep bringing up these stories like the Alamo or the 300. And the intro for our British friends out there, greatest men in history. I can't say just for the boom, or not the boomer, the millennium or generation time. Boomers don't appreciate it, or the millennials. One of the greatest men for centuries. He's in, I'd say he's in the top 50 at least for the past 200 years. Is Winston Churchill, who were on an island. Those of you that are there, surrounded by enemies, out-resourced, outgunned, but not outfought. It astonishes me how amazing the fortitude was of the people of Britain during the time of the Blitzkrieg, when the V2 rockets were buzzing over, and how so many were able to hold out so well without being cave or one of those somewhere. Yeah, it's actually kind of lightweight. Oh, paratrooper one. Yeah, it's a nice way to conceal the blade really ingenious, actually. That thing.
Adega, did we lose you? I think we lost him. You still there? Hello?
Am I back yet?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Oh, am I? Okay.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
internet's been cutting in and out again. I thought we had fixed that problem. I have no idea what you guys heard or didn't. Either way, I'm just saying that the motivation for fighting the war is very similar to what we're fighting now, except for bullets for using words, but it's the exact same war. What they called Nazis back then were socialists and communists. The difference between a socialist or fascist and a communist, and all of you know this, is one was a nationalist, the other one was not. There's nothing wrong with nationalists except for the motivation behind the nationalism. And when it comes to a Nazi group, it is the domination of all of species, all costs, for the salvation of their socialist society, for the growth of their socialist society. We are doing the same thing now, where people are using the lies and the propaganda to put you in your place, to dominate you, and to make you good little fascists and socialists, where the government tells you what to do, where to go, what to eat, who to be. And the people in World War II, a lot of them bought into it, especially the Germans, because they had been oppressed so badly, in some cases rightly, and in some cases because their leaders were using the information from the previous war and lies and propaganda to fester them up. And along came the brown shirts, or we call those, they were even called Antifa back then. They use the same flag, same symbols, everything. It's by design. They're the same people. But when you riled up a nation that was able to steal resources like that, they were able to build that massive war machine, and the people didn't expect it. And it still amazes me to this day how Britain was able to stand with all those U-boats sinking so many ships of resources going to Great Britain. The strength of the British people is just astonishing. It was truly, truly a miracle and an inspiration. And here in America, our government, picked their nose and played games and didn't do anything about it except for trying to sneak ships in, and a bunch of volunteers that went to China to try and save the people of Korea and China from being murdered, raped, looted, plundered, and subjugated by an evil emperor. So the motivation for them is the same as it is for us. We are engaged in a very, very battle, except instead of having lives destroyed. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You're great, brother. You had mentioned weapons. It's not about the weapons. One of the things that helped, though, and I want to talk about the war in the Pacific really quick. We had a plane, and it was called the Grumman Wildcat. It was the F4F Wildcat. And it could not match the Japanese Zero. And the Zeros had this little maneuver they would pull. They would fly straight up to gain altitude over the Wildcat. And if the Wildcat pursued, the Wildcat would stall out before the Zero and start falling back to the earth. And the Zero would just nose over, dive after, and shoot it down. It was a staple of Zero aces to try and lure the Wildcat into this maneuver. About halfway through the war, we came out with the Grumman F6F Hellcat, and it was twice as fast as the Wildcat. It could climb twice as high as the Wildcat. And I remember listening to a Wildcat / Hellcat ace that a Japanese ace tried to lure him into this maneuver. while he was in a Hellcat, and he followed him. And what this pilot didn't know is that the Wildcat and the Hellcat looked exactly the same. The body was exactly the same. You could not tell the difference between the Wildcat and the Hellcat. So as they climbed, it matched the Zero. And the Zero eventually stalled out and fell out while the F6F, yeah, Dave Bob, the F6F ate him alive. Yes, that is exactly what happened. The Zero stalled, and the Wildcat kept climbing, and then the Hellcat kept climbing, and the Hellcat nosed over and took him out. And it was a huge turning point in air superiority when they switched over from the F4F to the F6F, because the Zeros couldn't tell that it was a different plane. They didn't understand what was going on. They had reinforced the fuel tank. It had auto sealers. It had a bigger engine. It had a stronger engine. But the profile of the plane was exactly the same. It had just been upgraded with speed and altitude increasements because of the engine. It was a much meaner plane than the Wildcat. So I know earlier you said, it's not the weapons, but
no, but it's okay. It's fine because we had the better ships of everybody except for the Germans. Our planes were horrible. British Germans had better planes until about, like you said, halfway through the war, and then towards the end of the war, we had the Corsairs, and there wasn't a plane in the sky that could match them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm reading this thing. But no, I remember hearing about the F6s, and that was quite a humbling moment for the Japanese. You probably heard stories about it because one of their aces went down, who toyed with the Americans up until that point.
Yeah. Yeah, they toyed with the Americans. The Zero was extremely fast. It had the height advantage. It was bristling with weapons, but it was paper thin. It had almost no armor to speak of. So if you were able to chew one up with your machine guns, that was it. Usually that was the end of the fight. It didn't get any further than that because it had no armor to speak of.
That's part of the reason why the Flying Tiger is so successful.
Yes.
That plane actually could climb higher, but it was slower and didn't turn. But with their big guns and just one quick pass, the Zeros were decimated.
And Mark brings up the
P-51
Mustang. Yes, sir. Absolutely awesome plane. I always loved the P-38 Lightnings. It was such a wicked looking design. I'll see if I can pull one up real quick.
That's the dual fuselage?
Yes.
I love that too. That's my favorite plane of the war. I love it. I like the Corsairs, but yeah, they were, like you said, very interesting design. While he's pulling that up, it's just, my dad would, and you hear me always talking about my dad, it ought to let you know what kind of if I was ever half the man he was, I'd be considered myself extremely lucky. But the stories that came, and it wasn't about anything except for preservation of freedom and family that they volunteered and fought for. You look at the pictures nowadays of these kids in college where you see half the guys are either underweight or overweight and carrying man bags around with weird haircuts and funky glasses on. And the men of that age, at that time in their life, had military uniforms. There it is. That was a beast.
Yes. 162.
It reminds me of the Warthog an awful lot.
Yeah.
I think there's still a few of them around. I saw one once on the ground at a military air museum in California.
I've seen them fly. I've been to air shows and seen them fly.
I bet they're noisy beasts.
Yes, very loud. Very loud, but beautiful.
Right.
They had an air show in where was it? It was Fort Worth area, Fort Worth Air Show, and went with the kids, and we were watching one of those, and it was towards they did this so exceptionally well. Adega, you would have absolutely loved it. You're staring out into this, into this airfield, and you're watching it do its thing, and it's just to the left of the airfield, and everybody's got their eyes on it when 6 Blue Angels blast over your head going supersonic low to the ground. You never even heard them coming because they were going so fast that by the time they flew over you, that's when that sonic boom hit behind them, and you were like, it scared the crap out of everyone. It was an absolutely wonderful thing they did, because you're focused on this beautiful, beautiful plane from World War II, and boom, there's the Angels, and it just the sound after that was absolutely insane, because no one's looking behind; they're all looking forward at this. Everybody's got their eyes on this beautiful plane, and out of nowhere, just boom, there's 6 Angels screaming above your head. And we're getting off topic.
No, that's quite all right. Something I wanted to get into, because I can't remember what stream you were doing or where you guys were at, and they were talking about the nuclear bomb it had to deal with. I think on that day they're actually commemorating Hiroshima.
Yeah.
When the bomb, Fat Boy had hit that. I think it was Fat Boy that took that one out. But I talked with my really good friend and instructor from Japan who taught me martial arts. Akiyoshi Ito is his name. And, we always talked about different things. And some reason it came up about World War II, and I always was afraid to ask him about it. And we started talking, and I said, well, how do you people feel about the bomb? And he says, well, some of us are glad you used it, because if you hadn't, we would have. And we know what kind of people we were back then. And people don't understand that. In Japan, it's looked at different. It was looked at as the end of an imperial empire that was oppressing people. His father had been so brainwashed, and he realized this, that he wouldn't come to America because he was always taught it was the great evil. And he knew it wasn't true, but it sat wrong in him. So when it came to graduation from our chiropractic college, my friend didn't have his family there because they wouldn't fly across from Japan. And they were so indoctrinated. You could see films from the time that these people, when certain parts of the southern Japanese islands, when we were doing our island hopping, men, women, and children were jumping off of cliffs and committing suicide because they were told that the Americans were going to do some terrible things to them. And life under Americans would be far worse than anything that the empire could done. It was such an indoctrination. You guys have heard of the kamikaze, the whole thing of kamikaze, where they would learn how to fly a plane, how to get it off the ground, but they were never given lessons how to land it. They weren't ever supposed to land it. It was the honorable thing to take their plane and fly it. Okay, little boy. Okay, gotcha. Um, but they were never instructed on how to land these planes, and they believed so much in it. We've seen it again. We have people that strap on these belts and go run into certain ethnic groups and pull the fuse, and boom, they take out people on buses and buildings, and um, they become so indoctrinated that they can't see the truth. And here in America, we have people so indoctrinated that they're throwing Molotov cocktails and burning down buildings and looting, shooting each other because of their belief in a false idea. But like I said, my friend was really opened my eyes that the Japanese people realized that if we hadn't stopped them, they would have done it. They would have done it all over China. They would have done it onto Australia and New Zealand. They would have done it to the United States. And after that, they would have went in and backed up Germany against Russia. And then, of course, the Emperor and Hitler wouldn't share power if they'd ever dominated the world, and they'd go at it at each other. That's just the nature of imperialism or fascism or communism or socialism. They're all about dominating people, and they don't stop. Unfortunately, we had people around the world that were smart enough to know that these things cannot stand and have people live in any way, shape, or form that would resemble something. You should have had Colin on here tonight.
You're right. Colin is welcome on here anytime. Anytime Colin wants to come up here, he's more than welcome to come on here.
My thing's lagging again. Sorry, it keeps jumping. I could hear things. So if I cut out again, very sorry.
For whatever reason, I think I've got a short in my mic, and my mic keeps turning off.
So we got a lot of dead air tonight.
Oh, it has been happening the last couple of days because I was on my Batman stream and someone sent me a message and was like, "Why aren't you commenting?" I look up and my little light's blinking. I'm like, "Why are you blinking?" And then I caught it doing the same thing this morning. Like I just plugged it in. And Chris Persia, you enjoy that deep dish pepperoni pizza. Oh.
Absolutely. Maybe that's what's giving you the issues, Chris. It's the pizza.
Adega, Colin P. asked, as a historian, how do you view the idea that the two world wars were largely a two-part European civil war?
I don't think it was a two-part European civil war. I think there was a handful of family gangs in both sides against each other to make money, and they did. You think of the people who came out on top and who has the most money before and after the war. There's certain families, certain imperial and nobilities that are still pulling strings.
To this day.
To this day. That's my honest opinion. And the reason why we're having difficulties nowadays is because they're fighting, kicking tooth and nail, screaming, because there's been certain elections around the world, not just here. Started with Russia, believe it or not, where these powers started losing control of their new world order. That's, from everything I've studied, everything I believe, the documents I've seen, the people I've talked to, that's what I believe. I don't think it was a civil war. I think there's people that are pulling the strings and raking in the dough because they could play both sides.
And Eastland Burkholder says, imperialism needs a fever, a misdirected fever. Is that the right word? And are we reaching a point where people are too apathetic to and inert to do that? I hope not. I really hope not. Another great point from Eastland Burkholder. There are puppet masters behind historical conflicts, always.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get into some of the medical stuff, recent and historical, where big companies, big names that control those companies are using different aspects of people's diseases and disorders and sadness and pain of families simply so they can make a buck because they don't care about people. That's just the way it has been. Where there's good people, there's bad people, unfortunately. The bad people know how to hide, know how to manipulate. They take the people who are either extremely desperate for any kind word or good word that will inspire them to do horrific things simply because they are desperate, like the Germans were. Or there are others that are so fat and privileged that they can be whipped up into any type of frenzy, not realize they're being used as tools, which is what we see now.
Dave Bob comments, people are waking up to the fact that globalism is failing and people are starting to reject it.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. I share a lot of things with Loki behind the scenes about documents, events, things that have been going on. And we won't get into it here, but and some of you would very much surprise how controlled a lot of people are in a lot of these governments. I had shared with him something, like I said, I won't get into details, but you probably heard of a couple of really strange rulings in the United States Supreme Court lately. And it's because some of them are controlled and they vote different than what you would expect simply because they're being blackmailed. The same goes for pretty much most countries, but it's being cleaned up. There's Poland, for instance, is waking up. There was just Belarus. You can see them. It actually went the wrong way with their election, but if you follow the politics there, they're right by Russia. You could see how that country has been toyed with and manipulated through falsifying elections and people behind the scenes pulling strings to make sure the right people are in the right place so they can keep making their money. That was the same with the World War II. Not so much from Japan. Japan was opportunistic. But definitely from most of the Axis. The Russians, once the Tsars fell, they were controlled. And people don't realize it. Germany's always been controlled for centuries. And, there's other countries, but I don't want to get into it. That's not what it's about. But you brought it up, and I don't claim to be a historian. There he is. Probably more of a historian than I am. I don't claim to be a historian. I just like to read.
Yes. Yeah, it was required reading back at back home when I was growing up. There's always been a truth in the fact that Russia held Germany and prevented them from taking over. As how much they did, they were able to hold them. One of the things that a lot of people don't want to talk about is, guys, when the Russians were running into battle against the German officers would have set up machine guns, and these machine guns weren't used on the Germans. They were used on their own troops. If any of them turned around, they were fired upon. They were shot because they were considered traitors.
Anyone plays Warhammer 40k, where do you think they got the idea for the commissars and the Imperial Guard from?
Yeah.
In part, at least.
Hey, thanks for coming on. The British have come.
Honoured. That's not a personal comment, is it? I'm sorry. It's 2:45 in the morning. You don't expect me to be completely sensible, do you?
That's all right. We're the ones who are honored. You spend that time way early in the morning to come and join us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Welcome. I've discovered I've got a new habit doing people's live stream. It's a new way of socialising in this current climate.
Yes, in a wonderful way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, the check on again. That's okay. It's like, oh, I've got a new slide there. No, you're saying about the Russians. I remember. I mean, I was. I'm not sure exactly how your system works regards exams. We have exams called, well, they're now called GCSEs. They're called O-levels back in my day, which were you took up 15 and 16, and I did history at school, secondary school, and I remember one of the things doing one of the exams I put down a whole, despite the fact that it actually wasn't in the syllabus I was covering at the exam level, I covered a whole essay about Hitler's biggest mistake in World War II, which was basically going into Russia in the first place, because he just got fed in and chewed up and chewed up and chewed up.
I missed it. I'm fading out.
The one of the things I heard.
What?
I said I when I was 15, 16 doing my O-level exams, one of the history questions I put down was I feel that one of Hitler's biggest mistakes was going into Russia, because he just got pulled in and just chewed up and chewed up, because he never really had a chance of actually beating the Russians.
Right.
One of the things that I loved reading about, especially the way they designed the armor, was the Russian tanks. They were very, very simplistic compared to the German tanks, but the way they made the armor, the shells would deflect. Usually on the Russian tanks and on the American tanks, when a shell hit, it hit. But the way they had the armor on the Russian tanks, the shells would often deflect right off the armor. They'd skip off it.
Yeah.
And it was the simplicity of the tanks, the Russian tanks, that saved them in a tank-on-tank fight, not how complicated, because the Germans, they were making some big ass tanks, and the Tigers were scary. But when they went up against these very simplistic German tanks or Russian tanks, the Russian tanks could go toe-to-toe with them, even though they were simplistic, because of the way they were made.
Yeah, they also made for some fantastic models if you were a kid. Things like Tamiya and Airfix. Some of my favourite models of the World War II German stuff. But I would recommend, I think I've mentioned, you kindly gave me permission to mention an earlier channel stream. There's a British YouTuber called Lindy Beige, Lindybeige, and he doesn't do much. He doesn't post a lot, but if anybody is interested in history, I recommend him entirely. I think the man should actually have his own channel on TV. He covers everything from the Romans all the way up to the Second World War. Other things as well. He's done one or two bits and pieces in South America. But one of the ones he was doing is he does quite a bit with the tank museum here in the UK, which is tanks and other fighting vehicles, and he does things for them as well. Saying again, pointing out exactly that the angle of the front of the tank and shoot the front of the tank, and the biggest bomb is just going to bounce off and that sort of thing.
I'd never heard of that. You'll have to write it in chat so I know, because
Uh,
it's my end. It keeps fogging in and out, and I'm surprised you haven't kicked me off the stream yet, or my own site hasn't kicked me off the stream. Because I am definitely interested.
put it in private. I can't go, unfortunately, of course, I can't type in comment, and I've clicked off
okay.
the.
Gotcha.
Well,
I'll get it.
off.
I'll get it in there. Mindy Beige.
He also
don't-
does. He also does. If you're interested in fantasy games and that sort of thing, I mean, he's done things like historical inaccuracies in Game of Thrones and supposed historical medieval movies and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, Day Bob. It's forward sloping armor. The shells can glance off, but in reality, the angle makes the armor thicker on the forward plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of. I just couldn't think of the official name for it. It's been a long time since I talked about a lot of this stuff.
You just look at something like the Israeli Macabre. It looks like a freaking wedge. You look at it from the front, and it looks almost like a wedge.
Hey, Drew. Beware the Drew.
Beware of the Drew. Hashtag beware the Drew. Oh, Purple Valkyrie found it.
Thank you, Purple.
Thank you so much, Purple Valkyrie.
In fact, I know we're talking about World War II, but if you want to go back to medieval, also science fiction, oddly enough, all the things I like, medieval science fiction and comparisons, Shadiversity in Australia as well. Shad is, and in fact, he's also an author. So, like you, Adega, he is a published author.
Huh. I will check it out. Yeah, there's a lot I'd like to talk about that someday, but I can't. Not for a bit.
That's fine, fair enough.
Needless to say, this has been a colorful week that I can't talk about. Hard, but it's good.
I'm getting to the point now. It's like I might have possibly started paying you back for the invasion of American squirrels in this country by bringing a squirrel into this stream. We're talking about World War II and the Pacific Theatre. I said when sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I was just, it was not really related, but when it comes to this topic, especially when Loki played Churchill beforehand, I can't tell you how infuriated I was, what it was about 5-6 months ago, when people were from your country were trying to prevent his speech from being used in the public square. I guess someone got arrested for speaking or quoting his speech. And I thought, how far has, it is insane to think that they're that afraid that they have to shut down one of your greatest heroes and quoting them in public.
They go around typing the four-letter N-word, which shall not be named, on the statue of the man who,
Right.
admittedly with assistance from you guys and the Russians, basically stopped said party from ruling Europe.
Right.
Joey, would you like to learn the word history? Just as an idea? Yeah, I mean, it drives me insane.
He held them. He held them. Churchill held them. He held them. It was a Gandalf moment. You shall not pass. Everything from what happened at Dunhill. It's Dunhill, right? Dunkirk. Thank you. I'm thinking of a pack of cigarettes, not a historical battle.
Interesting, which, as I alluded to earlier in the chat, there is a connection between Dunkirk and my avatar. There was a gentleman named Mad Jack Churchill, no connection apparently, who led his unit back to Dunkirk with hardly any losses at all. And he did this because he went ahead of his regiment, and every time he saw a German soldier, he shot them with a silenced weapon called a longbow. He also went into battle with a claymore on his hip because he said a British officer should always wear a sword. There's a reason he's called Mad Jack Churchill, but yeah, it's like from Dunkirk onwards.
Was that a new invention then? The longbow? Or just not practically used?
It hadn't been used. Oh dear, I have literally an entire talk I give when I'm doing the enactments about the bow. It goes in and out and all sorts of things. No, it was used. I mean, I think it was used for sport. They went up for sport, but it certainly wasn't, as far as I know, issued to the British Army. Mad Jack Churchill was just what we like to call in this country a character with an extremely capital C. As I said, I mean, I think not sure if he's the one who went up the beach on D-Day playing the bagpipes. It might have been him, or it might have been someone else. I may be getting. I know there was at least one chap went up the beach that led the charge on D-Day playing the bagpipes, which would probably count as a war crime, but then again. Hopefully there's no Scots in chat to hear me say that.
That's part of the reason why we do this, Eastland. It's not just to raise a flag, but it's to make sure that all of us remember. You know, we're being bombarded with so much garbage. You know, we were just talking about them trying to silence Churchill and paint the opposition, the very thing that he fought against, on his statue. You know, it's sometimes if you're alone it can be maddening, but us together and sharing it with our friends and families, a remembrance of the greatness that went behind and how that we be now against the opposition, against sanity, really. The history is a motivator.
Yes. And if they can erase that history and change that history, then what do we have?
Some of you may have heard a story. I don't remember the name of it. My son shared it with me. I had read it years ago. It's a children's story of where you don't know the setting or anything other than there's a flag, and it doesn't matter just so long as it's a free nation flag. I think in this instance it happened to be the Stars and Stripes. But the teacher came in and the kids were kind of grumpy, and you know, some of them weren't, and they were excited to have a new teacher. She was young and beautiful and played nice with the kids and gave them candy when they were doing things. I'm paraphrasing the whole thing. And then she went to the kids were asking, how come we're not saying the Pledge of Allegiance? And she says, well, we're giving reverence to the flag. And she went on, you know, one of the kids is grumpy. Well, my dad died for that flag. And said, well, we need to honor him. How about this flag is so wonderful, everybody. Let's cut it up and everyone could take a piece home. And the kids had no idea that their history was just cut up in front of them. And the flag was destroyed and they never saw it again. With sometimes charming words and beautiful faces. And I can't say that for the SJWs. I don't know too many of them that are beautiful. They tend to be the real ugly ones. It's pretty obvious. But it's the slow eating of history, the devouring of what makes us who we are, what makes our countries great. And it's an honor to be with everyone here to be able to discuss why we need to remember these things, to keep the motivation going. There we go. Now you were saying, Loki, that what was it? Because this reminds me of that. Wasn't there someone, and I can't remember which war we were talking about, but the person was sure to die. It was a flag bearer, wasn't it? I'm thinking, yeah, Civil War. Maybe it wasn't you, but they would volunteer to carry the flag in a battle, knowing that they were probably going to end up dead because everyone shoots at the flag bearer. It's an easy target. You know, the person playing the bagpipes, I'm sure, would be one that they would want to take out. That's a brave man. I don't think he's just playing the horn for to pass the time, but it's inspiration, and it takes bravery because that's someone that the sharpshooters would want to drop.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And let's not forget that. I mean, I don't know. Forgive me for this, and I mean no disrespect to your military, but I don't know if the American military has quite the same. I know you have a humongous reverence for your nation's flag. I don't know if you have how your military has, because you've got a different setup for military. But we have regiment and units have flags which have got their battle ornaments on it. And one of the things that most tourists come to see, is the changing of the guard. Is the Queen's birthday. They took the colour, which basically means they literally, the guards regiments literally parade their actual. I'm just going to change the picture. They parade the colours of that unit in front of Her Majesty the Queen. The reason they do it is it goes back to back in the days when you didn't necessarily know what the colour was. Every week they paraded the colours in front of the regiment, so the regiment would know what the colours were, so they could actually know where to rally to in battle. And that is still something we do here every year on the Queen's birthday. And you see the honours, that the battle, and you see it's a big flag, and it's actually got sewn on it all battles that the regiments have fought and things like that. So again, it's obviously not something we do these days because we don't need to. But 200 odd years ago, you needed to know who your what your flag looked like.
Right. I don't know about our military if we ever went that extensive with it. And for Eris, I was talking about social justice advocates, not millennials per se. Just the ones who kind of lost their minds. Their physicality tends to match the bizarreness of their philosophies. I don't know. Prove me wrong.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming here tonight, both of you. Thank you so much for guesting. And we have got to do another one of these with the three of us. I'd absolutely love that if you guys are up for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've got to give Colin fair warning so that he'd have enough sleep and
yes.
Yeah, I find years ago I used to job when I did night shifts, and I'm almost on night shift at the moment. I'm not working at the moment, but I find I'm sort of half on American time. I don't normally go to bed till I normally end up watching at least Loki's, if not others. But it's not that late. It's the early ones like Mr. CDDV's. What's he calling it? Not these early morning ones. 6 o'clock my time. Unfortunately, I'm usually fast asleep by then. But these ones aren't that bad for me.
Oh yeah, Dave Bob, dude. Yeah, would love to have you on. Love to have you on too, man. That would be great, guys. Are you good with that, Adega, for next Thursday? The four of us?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
If you can't listen to other people talk about their understanding of history, it's not worth it, you know?
And they're asking for a part 2. Purple Valkyrie part 2, please. Heiress of Chaos part 2, passed by so quickly. These good shows too. Yeah,
Yeah.
Eastland Burkholder, you look up and the hour's gone. I
I
would
might
love to
even
do a
man-
part 2.
I might even manage to catch up on Farscape by then. It's whole weekend. I've only got about a dozen issues to watch. Issues to catch up with where you guys are. I just watched the Bugs one, the one where she gets the where Crichton pretends to be a peacekeeper.
Oh yes, I love that episode.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thank you for the super chat earlier. Thank you for giving us a reason to keep coming back with these, because I'm loving the chance to get to do these, especially with Adega and now Colin. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It's more of an honor, and it's absolutely fun, and I'm surprised people don't get bored or fall asleep when we're doing these. As long as people like it.
I'm constantly partly surprised. I mean, because I do medieval, as you can tell, more than any other bit. I'm constantly surprised when I look around just at this country at the interest there is in history, whether that in medieval history, in more modern history. I'm surprised and I'm very, very happy about it, because the more people actually know the history, hopefully the more people will actually try not to get it. I might actually insert a little bit of resistance to certain views that certain people try to press or suppress.
Oh, guess what we got?
And Lady Mist, thank you so very
as I
much.
pick up my mug.
Yes, I'm empty, but we're gonna raise the glass anyway. Thank you so very much, Lady Miss, and Skull!
There it is! Take your hat off, boy. That's a dollar bill.
Thank you so very much, Lady Miss. She doesn't say anything, but we know she is raising her glass right now and saying, Skull!
Can I take a very selfish minute?
Yes.
In chat, you highlighted Sparrow had done a simply wonderful review and posted it of the book, and I wanted to publicly thank Sparrow for doing that.
Oh,
very, very much appreciated. I had to retweet it. I put it on Parler. I put it on Gab. It was very nice. Thank you.
it's an awesome book. Thank you for writing it.
Louise, I would guess, without trying to guess a lady's age, that will make you approximately similar to my generation. Yes, I think we were actually brought up to respect what our parents and grandparents. My mother used to tell me, often told me a story of walking down or running down the road in London when she was somewhere around 10, on a German plane coming down shooting. She's actually lived in London during the Blitz, and she's actually been out and had a German plane come down firing at the houses.
That had to be a spooky experience.
I can imagine it was.
Absolutely. So we will be back next week with part 2 of this. We've been doing a lot of part 2s lately.
Big subjects.
Big subject, and having more surprises for you next week. I'm gonna kill it with the thank you for watching. I'm not gonna do the outro since I've already done it twice today. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Adega. Thank you, Colin. And we will see you guys tomorrow morning on Mornings of Mischief, and we'll all be back for 7 Kinds of Mischief next week. Everyone have a great night.
Hello.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.